maneco64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So doing a Q&A now or a chat live stream. Billy's here as well today. So I'll just wait a little bit for people to come on. Don't really have a particular subject in mind. Watching the markets. I'll answer your questions as usual and just chat in general about economics, geopolitics, precious metals. Yeah, Billy's here. I've also got my end of Fed mug. I'm actually drinking a cup of tea today, not coffee. Don't drink too much tea. The English drink a lot of tea, but my wife is English. But she drinks more coffee, though. But it is an English tradition, though, drinking tea. Sometimes it's good because it's not as much caffeine, I guess, as in coffee. Oh, we got Water Shambles. Whoop, whoop, Billy. Yeah, he's here. Stephen McCoy, do you look for silver prices to jump? Well, precious metals are continuing to do fairly well, even though right now, as I speak, we're coming off near the lows of the day. But we made a new high today. We traded above 15 in silver. Gold got up to around that 12-14 level, which I said was going to be resistance. And not surprisingly, as the U.S. market has opened, they've kind of hit gold and silver lower a little bit. But I think silver, as Jim Sinclair said in his interview with Greg Hunter and Bill Holter, silver is like gold on steroids, so it's a lot more volatile, behaves more like a cryptocurrency, I would say. But yeah, so I'd hang on to my silver as well, which I have. So we've got Paul Cockrell, Builder's Tea, it's the way forward. Nathan, hi Nathan Jones, nice to see everyone coming on here. Oh, there's Bugsy 2379. What's up, Mario? New York in the house. Yeah, I saw you from New York, Bugsy. Is that New York City or upstate New York? Long Island. Mahesh Nath. Hi, Mahesh. Silver for the win. Yeah, I have both, silver and gold. When I started out in precious metals, the first thing I bought was gold, Krugerrands. And then I started looking into silver. When you look at gold and precious metals, gold and silver are intertwined. You can't have, I don't think you can have one without the other. IK Radar, hi Mario, hello from Dublin. All right, nice to see people from everywhere. Oh, Bugsy's from Queens. Isn't that where President Trump was originally from, I guess, Queens? I think he was born there. Peter Oitzinger from Sydney, Australia. Yeah, wow, it's quite late in Sydney. I would say it's like you're 10 hours ahead, so you're in early in the morning. I would say even well. Mahesh Nath, how do you decipher WD GAN? Not sure what GAN was a technical analyst. I haven't looked into the GAN, the wave analysis that much, to be honest. Yeah, 2 that's what I thought, Peter. It's really early, well, very early morning, 2 a.m. or late night. I did a bit of collaboration with a project in cryptocurrencies, and one of the guys was in Queensland, north of Sydney, and it was tough, getting the timing to talk to him on Skype. It was either very late here or very early here, and the time difference is a bit of a difficulty. Peter Otzinger, he's watching Netflix, The Innocents. I haven't watched that. Earlier today, I was watching an old show on Netflix, Only Fools and Horses, comedy. British comedy is really funny. Del Boy. So Stephen McCoy is from Arkansas. All right, Harrison, Arkansas. Not Mena, Arkansas, Stephen. I'm just joking. Mena, Arkansas. World Explorer, he's got a few questions. Yeah, I'll answer questions, World Explorers. How old was you the last time I had an O? I don't know what you mean. How old was you the last time I had an O? Don't know. Peter Otzinger, based in the UK and Norway, the series. All right. I think World Explorer is going to go the way of the dodo bird. I think he's going to be removed. All right. World Explorer is out. I guess we're still getting a few trolls. World Explorer. Nathan Jones, can't believe Dow Jones is getting close to the highs from January. I thought that was the top. Well, you know, we're still not there. S&P has made a new high. Yeah, it's amazing with all that's happening, all the supposed trade wars, all the political mayhem. Yeah, and we're still, you know, still going up. Darian Oliver, I'm thinking that the largest bubble is in sovereign bonds, and that's where the crisis will begin. Yeah, you know, sovereign bonds, you know, government bonds, also mortgage bonds. You know, a lot of the QE that was done by the Bank of England, the Fed, the ECB was to buy mortgage paper that's basically worthless. If they try to sell that mortgage paper back in the market, it will have very little value. I think, yeah, the next bubble will be, you know, when it bursts, the next crisis will be an existential crisis for the fiat currencies. For example, in 2000, 2001, the crisis was just in the dot-com stock market, didn't really spill over into banking. Then 07 and 08 almost brought the whole banking system down. I think the next crisis will bring the whole monetary system down. And that's why it's important to have alternatives like gold and silver. Bugsy2379, great. Thank you very much, Bugsy, for the super chat donation. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate all the new subscribers, all the Patreon people who, you know, who give as little as $1 is great, or more, and also the one-off donations on PayPal. It really helps. The channel is growing, and so is my revenue from adverts, but it doesn't grow like for like, you know, with viewership and subscribers. But it's I know when I started the channel, I didn't think this is where I would be in 2 years, in 2.5 years, and I'm really chuffed that it's going well. Bitcoin Ben is here. Hi, Bitcoin Ben. I see you retracted your message, but anyway, who else? What else? Thoughts on Mike Maloney? I like Mike Maloney. I've been listening, you know, to him for a few years. Haven't listened to what he's been saying lately, but yeah, he's a good guy. Mike Maloney. I recommend his, his stuff as well. Bitcoin Ben, he says I did not. Wow, it's just that it says here that someone else retracted it. Okay, it doesn't matter anyway. Ohio chemtrails. Powell, that means the Fed chairman will bring the house down. Full stop. Yeah, he could be doing that. If you look at his resume, he was a banker. He also worked for the Carlyle Group. And the Carlyle Group, guess what they do? Well, they're private equity They're also they love taking over distressed assets. So you could be right. And I think the Carlyle Group, if I'm not mistaken, they're going public as well in the stock market. So that's what the central banks are there for. They're instruments of the very powerful and wealthy. They pump and dump the system. And that's why there's so much inequality. In the US especially, it's grown a lot. The US used to have a huge middle class, and now we're, the US and the UK, we're becoming more like third world countries, I would say. So you could be right about, what's his name, Jerome Powell. Yeah, because they keep going on about they're going to keep raising rates. I think they got another 3 or 4 rate hikes, one in September, and then I think one at the end of the year, and then maybe 2 more next year. They're going to be up to almost, over or around 3%. Ohio Chemtrails, how many ounces of gold and silver will you need during this financial reset? Well, Ohio Chemtrails, that depends on your circumstances, how much, your style of living, if how you live, but you need some, of course, to keep you going. But I would say if you have savings or investments in the stock market, to have at least 10% of what you think you have, what you have in physical gold and silver. No. How about that Jim Sinclair interview on USA Watchdog? Yeah, I thought it was a good interview. Some people think Jim Sinclair is, a fraudster. They talk about him like, but I think that's wrong. He's a good guy. I mean, you could say he's an insider. But he's actually doing he's been doing kind of like a public service for years, letting people know about what's going on and helping people. I remember before the crisis of 2008 accelerated, he started saying what we're going to see as a problem in this crisis are going to be CDS, or credit default swap. And very few people had heard about that. And he was right about that. That CDSs and derivatives were a huge problem. Yeah, Bitcoin is trading back up above 7,000 today. Cryptocurrencies have been a bit frustrating. I do have some Bitcoin. I like EOS, and EOS is doing fairly well today. I know it's come off quite a bit, like all the other cryptocurrencies. And one thing I wanted to talk about on EOS is that there's something called Scatter, SCATTER. It's the equivalent of MetaMask for Ethereum. So it's like a bridge for your browser, and they're coming up with some really good exchanges, so you can trade the tokens that are related to EOS. There's the NewDex exchange, newdex.io, and if you're on Scatter, all your positions come straight on the exchange, and it's quite safe. What a shambles. Mario, just remember, you gave a spanner mode right to and possible pitfalls, if any. Oh, Billy just jumped off. Jeff Yu from Pittsburgh. Good morning, Jeff. Rob B. Most silver gold bugs hate crypto, and you do have an open mind about it. What do you say when a gold bug challenges crypto? Well, I still believe gold and silver are still ultimately the top currencies. They're my favorite, but I think cryptos have value, and I think they have you know, a chance. You know, they're just competing currencies. Uh, I prefer them to the fiat money. They are a lot more speculative. So yeah, and it's able, you know, you're able to get out of the system. And one thing I like about the cryptos is a lot of the people involved in cryptos are into sound money. A lot of the developers and the techies. So yeah, I try to keep an open mind. Gur OG, I follow people that I don't agree with, but have to see on the other side also and make up your mind. Only follow yourself. Yeah, in the end of the day, yeah, like Gur is saying, I follow other people. Sometimes I read, you know, like the Rothschild magazine, The Economist, or I read the mainstream media. But most of the time, you know, in the end of the day, you do your research, do your homework, and it feels right, you know, do it. Yeah, Billy's made a move. Billy, come here, boy. Come here. Let's talk to you. Here he is. Say hello, Billy. Hi, guys. There you go. Anyway, the sprinkler ninja. I follow CNN and thumb down every video. Well, YouTubers try to recommend a lot of CNN, all the mainstream videos for me, and I've said no, thank you. I guess sometimes some of the alternative media, they put on clips from CNN. Um, yeah, Billy, he wanted to go down. He's just like something out the door. He's like really, he likes to guard the house. So, the other thing I wanted to talk about today is a little different. Because I spoke about this book. Uh, yeah, Billy reminds me of the Ewok. Yeah, I remember years ago we had another Shih Tzu, and this little kid saw it and went, "Oh, he's got an Ewok face." Ewok face. Peter Oitzinger, did you see the new U.S. currency notes that they have planned to issue? No, I haven't seen those. I mean, right now we don't have U.S. currency notes. We have Federal Reserve notes. So that would be significant. Yeah, I wanted to talk about Anthony Sutton. I'm reading one of his books that I should have read a long time ago called The War on Gold. M. Demur used to have a Lhasa Op. So yeah, they're very similar to Shih Tzus. They're a bit bigger. Marek from Norway. Hey, Marek, nice to see you. I think Gur is from Norway as well. Gur OG. So a couple of Norwegians. Paul Aber, Mario, is there a need to layer a crypto on top of gold to create a gold ICO? Glint, which offers digital fractional gold, seems to make that concept redundant. Any thoughts? Yeah, I have a Glint card. I don't think Glint is fractional. I think they hold. You know, if you buy an ounce of gold, they will hold an ounce of gold. I don't think they're fractional, and if they are, I wouldn't touch it. But the only thing about Glint, it's centralized, but with a crypto, it would be centralized because someone has to store that gold somewhere. And that's the thing with gold. Bugsy2379, do you think McCain is really dead? Well, there are rumors that he was actually executed in the military court, and they've said that he died. I know he had cancer. I don't know. But it's good. I think it's a good thing that he's not around anymore, because he's he's a neocon. He's very pro-war. He did. I think he sang that little song, "Bomb, Bomb, Bomb Iran," right? But one thing I don't understand is why President Trump is, hired John Bolton. Maybe he had to do that for some reason. I don't know. John Bolton is the worst. I think John Bolton is just as bad as John McCain. Monad Wisdom. What's your view? What's your view on what will happen post-Brexit? Will Britain collapse, or is it all part of Project Fear? I think Brexit has been used as a cover for the collapse, and it's not the reason for it. The reason for the collapse is that this country is heavily indebted. You know, yeah, we've got so much debt and we can't repay it. And when interest rates start going up, it's not going to be pretty. And we've been used too much to the welfare state, and we can't afford it anymore. Mark Stan, hi Mara, do you see the crash sooner now? What indicators are you tracking? Well, you know, what the stock markets don't seem to want to crash. I guess the only thing that what are we going to get? I don't know. Are we going to get a crash of confidence in the currency, which is hyperinflation? Maybe the stock markets will stay high. Look at Venezuela, the stock market stayed high. But some psychoanalysts, they say, you know, they said 18 months ago, 12 months ago, like Charles Nanner, that the stock market is topped and is come down now. But we've just had a new high in the S&P. I know the Dow didn't confirm it, so I don't want to predict a crash, but it won't last forever, this bull market. I think it's the longest bull market in recorded history. Mike TM. Hey, Mike TM. Nice to see you. Armus Head talking about the Brazilian economic situation. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a mess. The guy who's in front in the polls for the presidential election, he's in jail. I think, you know, the economy, yeah, it's not doing great. The currency has been going down. The Fed policy isn't helping. The only thing going for Brazil is that Brazilians are used to crisis. They're used to currency collapses. They're used to inflation. But we in the West, in the UK or in the US or Western Europe, not so much. So I think Brazil will survive, but it's always Brazil. You know, my dad used to say that he was told when he was young by other, you know, adults at the time when he was young, that Brazil was the country of the future. And then when he got older, he said it's still the country of the future. So, and I can say it now, it's still the country of the future and probably will always be, unfortunately. It's got a lot of natural resources, a lot of natural wealth, but it's badly managed and corrupt. That's the simple truth about Brazil. Not that we're not, you know, our politicians in the UK or the US or Europe aren't corrupt, but they're not as corrupt as in Brazil. Brazil, corruption and cutting corners is a way of life. Kathleen Smith, Anthony Sutton talks about Hegel. Do you see anything about this? Do you know anything about this philosophy? Yeah, the Hegelian dialectic. Some people argue that he was the forefather of fascism and the Nazi philosophy. Hegel talks about that society. There's always, you know, you got to divide and conquer. You know, divide and rule. That's the Hegelian dialectic, and that's what I think we have. You know, divide and rule, and we still do. They still try to divide us politically, domestically. You know, whatever way you want, class-wise. But one thing I took notes the other day. I was listening to one of Anthony Sutton's videos. And he talks about the fact that in a socialist society, one of the things they do is to suppress information and suppress the truth. And he made this video back in the 70s. So he was way ahead of his time. So that sounds familiar. So that shows that we're not in a free society. We are in socialist society. And that's why the mainstream media, that's why the YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, that's why they censor people who like freedom and small government, because they're socialists. The other thing he talks about that I think is really interesting, and is one of the reasons I've given up, watching the mainstream media and believing what the government says, is because Anthony Sutton says there's 3 levels of information. He said the first level is the establishment version, and that's what we get in our mainstream media, mainstream newspapers, and that's provided for by the government, by the press offices, and that's what everyone believes in. Or nowadays, of course, that's called fake news, and still a lot of people don't know about this, but we do. And then he says the second kind of information is the revisionist one, where people will look into the first level of information and try to find things that don't work out. But he notes that the revisionist, it's still controlled by the powers that be in the establishment. So it's like not really at the third level. So what's the third level? Well, the third level is people that do, they really try to get new documents, new evidence, and they have to really fight for these documents and evidence, because he talks about how in the first and second level of information, a lot of times the establishment and politicians and the universities, they keep these documents locked up for 75 to 100 years. So if you really want to know the truth, you need to go to the third level. And the other thing he says is that once you get to the third level, you get documents that usually you couldn't get, and you expose the first and second level of information. A lot of people won't believe you because they've been brainwashed to believe in the establishment story. And that's why, a lot of people are called conspiracy theorists, even though you've done your research and your homework. I would say Alex Jones, InfoWars, they're more on the second level, because they're revisionists, but they're getting information that they're still allowing us to have. I guess an example of second level would be all the information that they let us have. I think it was last year in relation to the JFK assassination. Why wouldn't that be third level? Well, because they redacted a lot of it, and a lot of files are still locked up. So I thought that was really interesting. And I think that's why a lot of people in the mainstream media hate President Trump. Does he know about these 3 levels of information? I took a few notes about that. I listened to the video. Just search Anthony Sutton on YouTube, and you find the video. He talks about levels of information. So the first level, the establishment, he says what most people believe, what government and establishment wants you to know, needs to be consistent with what was said in the past. That's the first level. Kevin Johnson, let's see, let's go up here. Kathleen Smith, the Catholic Church and the Jesuits were great at creating narrative and indoctrination. Yeah, and I think they were the precursors of the intelligence agencies. The Jesuits actually trained the original MI6, I think, the original intelligence in the UK. Kevin Johnson, do you support Israel? Well, I've got nothing against Jewish people, but I think the Jewish, the Israeli government, like a lot of the governments in the West, the UK government, the government in the US, the government in France, they've been carrying out a really, really bad foreign policy. Yeah, so that's my view on it. I don't, I think the present Israeli government, I don't like it, but I think it's a lot to do with corruption. I saw that Bibi, Benjamin Netanyahu's wife, she's involved in a corruption case. So I think it's just like here, they want to keep people distracted, so they create all these crises. Bugsy, thank you very much. He says, I think Greg Hunter should interview Mario. Well, I haven't been contacted by him. I'd love to be interviewed by him, but I don't like contacting people and say, interview me. I like them to make the move. Shane Sturgis, the UK isn't corrupt, but London and government are. Well, the government represents the United Kingdom. What I think you mean, Shane, is the people in general. But a lot of times, London and the government are a reflection of the people. I would say, the UK is very corrupt. The only reason that word isn't used here too much is because of the libel laws in the UK. They're very strict. You hardly ever hear anyone calling anyone corrupt in the UK, but I think it's one of the most corrupt countries in the world. So there you go. But anyway, the same thing goes for the US. The same things go for the European countries. Every country in the world is corrupt to some extent, unfortunately. There's yeah, you can't say that no country is 100%, honest, unfortunately. You can try to be. Laura, Mario, what's your opinion on cashless society? I personally don't like credit cards and digital money. Yeah, I mean, cashless society, if you go back, I think 120 years ago, they try to get people, stop people from using gold coins. And then with World War I, especially in Europe, they were able to stop people using gold coins, and then they got people to start using paper money, and now they're trying to stop people using paper money. And why is that? Well, that's because it gives the banks and governments a lot of power. And no, I think it's a bad thing. I think we should go. Yeah, I think we should go back to having gold coins and silver coins, and we shouldn't be dependent on government and banks. They can. Cashless society will be bad, and hopefully it won't happen. But it doesn't mean that you can't, even in a cashless society, and I hope we don't have one, you can still protect your wealth with gold and silver. You can still get out of the system. Kevin Johnson, isn't the source of Israel's power the central banks and the elite families? Well, it's the source of power here. It's the source of power in the whole West, isn't it? All the big governments, welfare states. So it's not just Israel. Israel is just like a puppet of the globalists, just like we are at the moment. So yeah, I mean, there's no difference. But yeah, I think Israel was originally, of course, the idea of a Jewish state, started back in the late 1800s, Theodore Herzl, and then you had the Zionist movement started. Then you had the Balfour Declaration that was written by the Rothschilds, who represented the Jews of the UK. and the UK government, Balfour, who was the foreign minister, made the declaration, accepted it, and that was one of the goals of the British Empire, was to help, found or create a Jewish state, and that's what they did, with the UN eventually in 1948. But they had to have World War One. They had to beat or destroy the Ottoman Empire, because the Ottoman Empire ruled over the whole of the Middle East, and you couldn't have a Jewish state with the Ottomans in power. So, yeah, the end of the Ottoman Empire opened the door to that. And the Fed, yes, Bugsy, and the Fed. I've got my and the Fed mug, maneco64, and the Fed mug. And it's also got here a home of alternative economics and contrarian views. It's in the maneco64 store, which is in the description of all my videos. There's a link there if you want to buy one. There's also a Billy mug and the Fed shirts. How long can central banks keep buying all the debt? Well, until people have faith in the central banks, until people believe they're scam. When people twig onto it, their game will be up very quickly. For now, though, they're not only buying bonds, but they're buying stocks. I would say that a lot of this move up in the stock market is to do with central banks buying stocks. Maybe not the Fed, but other central banks are doing it. The Swiss National Bank has been buying a lot of tech stocks in the US, the S&B. Oh, you're welcome, Kevin. I want a Billy haircut. Well, Billy had a haircut about, I think, a few weeks ago, so it's going to be a while now till he gets his next one. Dan C, will inflation come home to roost? Well, Dan C, if you've watched some of my videos, we're having massive inflation already. And how can I say that? Well, because inflation is purely a monetary phenomenon. So the more money they print, the more money they create out of that, out of thin air. That's inflation. I think what you mean by whether it will come home to roost is whether that will go into consumer prices. Of course it will. It will right now. And I would argue that it's already doing so. The only reason people are not talking more about it is because they fudge the statistics that measure the rise in prices, and they call it inflation. Because CPI is not inflation, it's just a measure of prices. And that's how they get away with it. Peter, what are your thoughts on art and antiques as investments to preserve wealth? I have a nice collection of religious icons. I think that's a good thing as well, Peter. My dad, he had icons as well, the Russian icons, and I think it's a part of antiques as well. I know the antiques market can go up and down. There are periods where it's very hard to sell antiques, but over the long term, yeah, I think it's a good thing as well. Our central banks have destroyed the bond markets. They have, especially the Japanese. There's no more liquidity in them. And I used to. That was the market I worked in as a futures and options broker, the government bond market. I remember back in the 90s, early 2000s, the 10-year yield was like in the US 6-7%. Was normal. Now it's getting close to 3%, and people are worried. The daily rant. Watch Iran. Something incredible is about to happen. Hassan Rouhani. I guess that's the president, right? The good people of Iran have the power. Fight for your freedom. Q. All right. we'll see. I don't know. It's an interesting country, Iran. I don't think they've invaded a country in many, well, some people, I think hundreds of years, but they're supposed to be a huge threat, Iran. I don't get it. Watch what is happening in Germany today. I haven't seen what's happened in Germany, um, but I'll have a look. Mary Nestu. Hello, Mary. The interview that you pointed us to with Jim Sinclair was outstanding. However, it was somewhat disturbing when is now. Well, I have to say, I don't believe 100% that it's happening now. The only reason I pointed that interview out is that I think they've got good points. I can, honestly saying a few 2-3 years ago, they were warning people to get out of the system. They said everything, and it's still going. But maybe getting out of the system for some people takes a longer time than just a few days or a few months. I think so, but they've got good points. I don't know if it's going to happen now, but that's what they think. I mean, we're keeping an eye on the emerging market currencies and everything, but Turkey and Brazil. So anyway, it doesn't hurt to listen to what they have to say. That's what and I always keep an open mind, and I try not to let these predictions stop me from living. That's the important thing. Have be prepared, but also keep living. Are mobs rising up in Germany against immigrants? Yeah, it just seems to me that this migrant crisis has been done by design to basically divide and conquer, right? Because things financially are so bad in Western Europe, in the US, and the UK, that it's just another distraction. It's just it's the Hegelian dialectic, right? That they always create problems. So they have an excuse to be in power. The governments that don't, the politicians that don't deserve to be in power. It's like problem. They create the problem. They bring in, and I'm not saying I'm against immigration or immigrants because I am an immigrant in the UK. What is not right is just to flood a country with like in Sweden. I think they've over the last few years they've brought in 600,000 new migrants in a country of 10 million. It's just a bit overdone. Marinesto, thank you for the super chat. Have a coffee on me, my friend. Thank you, Marinesto. I appreciate that. Julevius, do you think that the crypto market has a future? Yes, I do, actually. I do. The blockchain technology and cryptos do have a future. What a shambles. Whoa, truth bomb alert. Mary Weaver, what is your opinion of the U.S. Social Security funding? Will it be available? What funding, Mary? There is no money in that Social Security funding. I think they will always pay, the recipients, but it will be in dollars that are worth a lot less than when the recipients paid into it. It's a scam, unfortunately. And it's the same thing here in the UK and other Western countries. Here we have the same kind of, system. John Smith, any thoughts on the new Palladium coin from West Point? I haven't looked at those yet, so I'm sorry I can't comment on it, but it seems interesting, Palladium. PEH2. If you were the head of the Fed, what would you do at this point? Uh, well, okay, let's assume that I would accept being the chairman of the Federal Reserve, even though I don't believe in the institution. Well, I would be raising rates very aggressively, a lot more aggressively than Mr. Powell. And you might ask why? Well, because we need to the system to reboot. We need the system to cleanse. Uh, unless we do that, the economy is never going to get healthy again. It's just like a forest. Sometimes you need a forest fire, for the forest to grow again and to, that's just natural. Yeah, so I would raise interest rates even more. I would start raising rates 0.5% at every meeting. Well, every other meeting, like they're doing now. Instead of a quarter, it would be a half, and I would be telling them, yeah, and I would maybe start dumping a lot of the treasuries to let interest rates go up, but they'd probably sack me if I did that. President Trump would probably nominate someone else. The thing is, the chairman of the Federal Reserve cannot end the Fed. It's the Congress and the people that have to do it through an act of Congress. So there you go. Hi, Rick. How you doing? Kevin Johnson shoot himself. No, I wouldn't shoot myself, but John Middleton, did you now have to did you know you have to birth? I don't understand what you're saying. Sorry, John. Be a little clearer. Luder 92, you're supposed to say, I'd let the market determine rates. I guess, yeah, Luder, you're right. But I think right now the market is being controlled by the Fed a lot. So I think the Fed has done so much manipulating that the market rates should be a lot higher. So I think that would actually help. So I probably wouldn't have to raise it as much. The market would do it for me. But you're right. But the Fed is not a free market institution, right? And the guy asked me if I was a chairman of the Federal Reserve. Ideally, we wouldn't have a Fed and the market would set rates. Pat, wasn't the act of Congress that created the Fed extended for another 100 years? I never saw that there was a limit of 100 years for the Federal Reserve Act. I've read the act, and it doesn't say anything like that. I've seen people on the internet say that prior to 2012. They said, well, the 100-year term for the Fed is going to end. But I don't think the act put a limit. Like, the Bank of the United States had a charter, they call it, had a 20-year charter. The Fed does not have a 100-year charter, so I don't think they had to renew it. Relaxing Woody 05, would a system reset get rid of all the criminal elites, or would it only serve them? I think it would get rid a lot of them, because there's a lot of them out there who are not really in the know, even though they're elites. But no, the really top dogs out there, they would benefit from it as well, of course. But I think it would hurt the great majority of the ruling or the mid-level elites, I would say. David Montross, how is Iceland doing after getting rid of there? You mean THEIR, right? Their central bank system. I'm not sure. I think Iceland did the right thing. They prosecuted and jailed the bankers. They let the banks, they didn't bail out the banks. I'm not sure they got rid of their central banking system. And if they did, that's a good thing. I, I, I've been saying that Iceland is a good test case. They let the system implode. They didn't bail anyone out. They prosecuted the bankers. They put them in jail, and their economy has done a lot better. So yeah, but I'm not sure they've gotten out of the central banking system. I still think there's a central bank in Iceland. Bobby is. Hi, Mary. Do you think the U.S. real estate will turn to a buyer's market in the near future? Well, of course it will, of course. But the only question is, when. It's the same thing here. Right now, it's kind of even difficult to sell. So it's changing a little bit. In the UK, prices are starting to come down. Not as easy to sell, taking a little longer, I think. Zero Hedge breaking. Swiss multi-billion asset manager GAM Holdings announced it has frozen withdrawals. Okay. Rene, hi Mara. Do you believe what Jim Rickard says about ICE 9? Yeah, I mean, it's possible. The only problem is when it's going to happen. We could have the whole system freeze up. It's very possible, and they'll have to close all the markets. It's happened before. It happened after 9/11. They closed the markets for a week. It happened after the beginning of World War One. I think even though the U.S. was not in the war in the beginning, I think from the summer of 1914 to like the end of the year, the New York Stock Exchange was closed. So it could definitely happen again, ICE 9, where the system freezes. Andrea Deity. Hi, Mara. I wonder about the emerging markets like Turkey, Argentina, Brazil, and others. What should I look for to watch them? Keep an eye on their currencies. Yeah, that's the best thing. You can also go on Bloomberg and look at the bond markets and look at their interest rates, like the government bond yields. If they're spiking higher, that's a bad sign. If the dollar is like really shooting up against their currencies, that means their currencies are collapsing. That's what you need to keep an eye on. So let's see. I'll take a few more questions, and then I'm going to call it a day. I'm approaching the hour mark. The daily rent. If the US dollar drops like a rock, doesn't something else have to go up? Well, yeah, in terms of the fiat currencies, of course, yeah. If the dollar drops, it's going to be against the euro or the pound. But the only way for the dollar to drop and for the whole system to reset is for the dollar and all the other currencies to stay quite stable, but then for commodities to go through the roof. So gold, silver, all the other base metals, energy. That's how you really reset the whole system. But you have to have the fiat currencies quite stable amongst between each other, and then and then the commodities go up. Sorry, in terms of all the fiat currencies, but they'll have to be stable. But yeah, the dollar can only go down against other fiat currencies, if other fiat currencies go up, and that defeats the purpose of all the other fiat currencies devaluing, because they don't want to devalue. So it's like a zero-sum game. So the only way to get the system reset globally or worldwide is to for every fiat currency to collapse against real things. Thanks, MM. No. So one or two more questions, and then I'll call it a day for now. I'll wait until you guys. Rene, hi, Mario. Why do you believe gold will work in a crisis? Thanks. Well, because it has a track record of thousands of years of retaining its purchasing power. And the other thing about gold, it's that it's outside the banking system. And by that, I mean that you can hold it like this. You don't have to have it in the bank. So if there is a crisis, you've got it. But if you've got paper money in the bank and there's a crisis, you've lost your money. And it's not even your money in the bank, because technically it's a unsecured loan. The daily rent, do you think Brexit will happen? Yeah, I think it will happen. It will. Kevin Johnson, married. Do you trust gold-backed crypto? Not at the moment. I still trust just holding on to it. Mary Weaver, thank you, Mary. This is my first time on live chat. Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it, Mary. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for being on. And thank you, everyone, for showing up, for contributing, for donating on Super Chat, and for supporting the channel. And I'll talk to you later. Take care. Goodbye.